Hi everybody, today we are working on Sanken COS-11D lavalier microphones. We're going to be wiring them for compatibility with Lectrosonics transmitters. Specifically, we're going to be using the servo version for more modern Lectrosonics transmitters and be wiring TA5 connectors onto here. Now, if you have older Lectrosonics transmitters, you're going to have to use the universal method of wiring these up to get them to work with your transmitters. I'm going to be using the servo. It's easier. It doesn't involve inserting a resistor inside the connector, and I don't really want to mess with that. So, and all my transmitters are like more modern. So I don't have to worry about that. First of all, let me make a point of the importance of soldering to me. It's been really useful for me to know how to solder and like fix basic connections with, you know, cable wiring and stripping and cutting and soldering and all that good stuff. And I've been able to make my own custom cables that are exactly how long I want and have exactly the right connectors on either end. That's been really handy for me. It's been a great skill to have in my career. So here's how I saved some money recently by knowing how to solder. I went on eBay and I found this one listing for 5 Sanken COS-11 microphones, and they looked great. They were brand new, and they came with the accessories with the lapel clip and the little windscreen and the box and the manual and everything. And there's 5 of them for $250 a piece, but they were wired for 4-pin Shure connectors, the TA4 connectors for Shure transmitters. And that's not what I have. So if I didn't know how to solder, these wouldn't be an option to me. But because I do, all I have to do is buy the microphone and then buy a $10 TA5 connector and then just rewire it. All right, so I'm going to start by removing the TA4 connector off of this microphone. I've got some 4060 rosin core solder that I'm going to just dab it just a little bit onto my iron here. We're going to use that melted solder that's on the iron to melt the solder that's on our connection. All right, and I'll salvage that TA4 connector in case we ever pick up some Shure transmitters in the future. I might be able to use that. I pulled up the wiring diagram for us to reference while we're working. I've got a fresh TA5 connector for us to put onto our microphone. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of jumper wire to jumper pins 2 and pins 4 together. We're going to take a look at exactly how long the pins on the connector are, and that is how much insulation we're going to strip off of the wire. I'll tin that jumper wire with a little bit of solder. All right, now I'm going to cut us just a teeny tiny little jumper wire. We strip the other end of our jumper wire. Then I'll tin that end of the jumper wire. When you're soldering on this wire, you're going to have to be in and out real quick because otherwise you're going to melt the insulation on the wire and expose the conductor underneath, and that could cause a short inside the body of your connector. So how do you tell which one of these pins is pin 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? If you look at the front of the connector, the numbers are actually printed into the plastic. You might have to use a magnifying glass, or you might be able to use the camera on your phone to zoom in and see them better. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is in the middle. I will insert my teeny tiny jumper wire into pin 2. We're going to have to be real quick and careful about this, but I'm going to solder that wire into pin 2. Okay, it looks like it's on there firmly, and I didn't use too much solder and create a short between the pins. It looks like everything's separate, and so far. I'm going to bend that little bit of wire around over to pin 4 now. All right, now that that's securely in place, I'm going to solder it in. You can see that I melted the insulation on the wire a little bit when I soldered it on, but the important part is that it's there and it's going to prevent shorts. Okay, there's a couple things we need to do before we solder any more wires onto our connector. First, I've got this, this is kind of an optional thing, but I've got this little rubber booty that I'm going to put on this microphone. So I'm going to slide this on. Next, I'm going to take the plastic shell of the TA5 connector and put that on. Now I'm going to take a 1-inch piece of heat shrink and put that onto the wire for the microphone. Then I've got this little plastic bit that has to go on. Now I'm going to use my helping hands to hold the wire while the other helping hand holds the connector, and I'll start connecting wires. All right, I've got the ground wire secured against pin 1. We're going to solder it in. So next I'm going to secure the white wire to the center pin, that's pin 5. I'm having a little trouble getting the white wire in position to get it soldered down. I'm going to try a little technique called pre-tinning, which is where I put a little bit of solder on the pin first, and then a little bit of solder on the wire, and then melt the two together, and hopefully that'll make this a little bit easier. So what this is going to allow me to do is hold the iron with one hand and the wire with the other instead of having to hold the solder. So I'll push the wire against where I want it to go, and I'll melt the solder together with the iron. And I'll be pre-tinning pin 3 as well for the black wire. Okay, so now we're going to slide that plastic bit you saw a minute ago over the top of our solder points to protect them. So now I'll shrink down that 1 inch of heat shrink that I put on here. The metal part of the heat gun is going to be hot, so make sure you put it down in a way that it doesn't burn anything. Then we're going to slip on this little metal piece. It's going to go over that little plastic ring, and it's got 2 sets of tabs on it. One set of tabs is going to create a ground connection, and the other set of tabs is going to grab on to the main insulation of the microphone cable. I'll be using some needle nose pliers to crimp down the metal tabs onto the outer insulation of the microphone cable. And I'll crimp the other set of tabs down onto the exposed shielding in the cable to ground the shell. Now I put the metal shell over the front of the connector. And I'll slide the back of the connector on and screw it down. This part is optional, but I've got an extra protective piece of rubber here that I'm going to slide over the top of everything. All right, it should be working at this point. Let's plug it in and try it out. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Definitely want to check this on headphones, but so far it looks like it's working. Okay, I got one more mic to convert from TA4 to TA5. I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. I'm going to try a different type of wire for that little jumper on the inside of the connector, and I'm going to be using a different connector. It's going to be this connector from Cable Techniques. It is a right angle connector. You're going to get to see what this looks like here in a second. I'll show you why I enjoy using these connectors. They've worked well for me for this application. And let's get to it. So we start with my Sanken COS11 with the TA4 connector. I'm just going to start with a fresh cut. I'm just cut the whole connector off. And we're gonna re-strip everything. This is not easy to do. This takes some practice, and yes, you might end up practicing on a microphone that retails for $380. But such is life. Fortune favors the bold. So here we go. I'm gonna actually, you know what? I'm just gonna cut it right off. Just cut it right off. There we go. Oh, be brave, be bold. Yes, we lost half an inch of cable off of our total length, but I got some spare here. It's all good. First, we're gonna put on about this much heat shrink onto my microphone cable. We've got these connector parts. The first one we're gonna put on is this little plastic ring. That is gonna go onto the cable before we do any soldering. Then I'll take the connector with the pins that I need to solder onto, and I'll put that in my helping hands. I'm gonna strip off about half an inch of insulation off of the wire on my microphone. This microphone's got a wrapped stranded shield, and I'm gonna pull all the metal strands of that shield off to one side and twist them together and try to retain as much of those strands as possible. So what's left is a black conductor and a white conductor and then some string. I'm just gonna cut out the string so it gets out of the way. Then I'm left with the black, white, and ground. I'm gonna use my solder to tin the ground. You're tinning those shield strands together to hold them together in one piece, but try not to tin the whole thing all the way down. You want to retain just a little bit of flexibility at the base to position the wires where you need them. I'm going to use just a small piece of heat shrink to insulate part of that ground wire. I wish I had a smaller gauge of heat shrink. I do not, so we're just going to be using this. This is a hard part, takes some practice, stripping the black and white wires. They're very small, they're very easy to just cut straight through. Be careful, go slow. So the conductors inside the black and white wires are also stranded, so we're going to twist those strands together. And I will tin the black and white wires. Using my helping hands, I have positioned the ground wire into pin 1 on the connector, and I will solder that down now. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the jumper wire from pin 2 to pin 4. This time I'm going to be using this enameled wire. It doesn't look like it has insulation on it, but it has an enamel on it that's very thin. And this is a single conductor, so it bends and retains a shape, so it should be able to make a nice little U shape for a jumper. You can tell that it has enamel on it because it won't accept solder immediately. I'll heat it up and I'll apply some solder here. And if it was just wire, it would be tinned pretty much immediately. But you can see that it's not taking solder. So what we're gonna have to do is burn some of that enamel off. You can also use sandpaper to scrape it down, but I'm trying to be real precise with this. So I'm gonna just melt it off with a bubble of solder. I'm gonna hold it up onto the wire, and it's just gonna smoke and melt away some of the enamel. And once the enamel's gone, it will start to accept solder. And you want to get enough enamel off that about the same length of enamel as the pin that we're soldering to. So I'm just going to cut off a very small piece of this for my jumper wire. I'll burn the enamel off the other end of the jumper wire. The solder and burning the enamel is going to produce some smoke. Try not to breathe in it. Maybe find some ventilation. Okay, I'm going to bend that into a U shape. Okay, I've very carefully positioned that little U jumper into pins 2 and pin 4. I've used the helping hands to hold the white wire in position. Let's solder that down. I was a little generous with the solder on that one. I don't see any shorts. You can test for shorts with a digital multimeter if you've got one. Finally, I've got the black wire in position and we're going to solder that one down. This part might not be necessary. I'm going to try it and I'll explain why in a second. I'm going to add just a little bit of super glue where the insulation ends on the microphone cable. And then I'm going to bring the heat shrink up on top of the super glue. And then I'm going to heat shrink that down. I'm hoping that the super glue will prevent the cable, the insulation on the microphone cable itself, from sliding on the inside of the heat shrink that I put on there. Now I'm going to slide that plastic bit up and over the connections. We'll slide the whole thing into the connector housing. Now we're going to put the back of the connector on. Here's another reason I added that little drop of super glue. I'm hoping that that little drop of super glue is going to thicken up that one end of that heat shrink that I put on there, because hopefully that will get caught in this little groove that's cut into the back of this connector, and hopefully it'll be less likely to pull out if it gets yanked on. And now we secure the back on with the 2 screws. This is a personal preference thing. I have modified most of my microphones to use the Cable Techniques right angle connectors. I find that if you use the straight connectors and you put those in, it kind of sticks up and out from the body of the transmitter pack. And you can get leverage on that, and it can get pushed on and crack the shell of the connector. It also can kind of put pressure on the connector, the connection here on the transmitter itself. When you use the right angle connector and you plug that in, it's much tighter to the body of the transmitter, and it doesn't stick out, it doesn't poke out and get in the way. The cable immediately dashes off to the side that can just right away be tucked into a belt or into the waistband without sticking up and having kind of a loop first. I like them. It does complicate using lav bullets a little bit. It's easier to use a lav bullet with a straight connector than with a right angle connector, I will say that. But other than that, I prefer the right angle connectors. And that's it. I hope this was useful. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to see more of my content, and we'll see you next time.